Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that I just stamped out using a stamp from Viva Las Vegastamps as my kind of focal point and subject matter in the scene. I just did a simple composition right here using the Snowy Creek, but I embellished it a little bit with the use of the two different sizes of leafless limbs, and just for the entire background it's just the cloud with rising moon. Going with a large moon like that kind of creates a little bit of a drama, you know, as a backdrop of you know, lighting, a source of light element within the scene. This is snow in here, so I keep things fairly subtle as far as the usage of color in here. But if you watch this scene, you'll see how I just kind of simply use just a cut piece of paper to create, you know, a lot of different depth, hopefully in a kind of a subtle way, within a very reflective surface of snow. Okay, snow reflects, I don't know, I forget what percentage of light. It's like 80% or something like that. So I don't want to go too dark up here, but I also do want to create some sense of depth. So anyways, if you watch this video, or if you want to fast forward, you know, the things for me that are really fun are adding things with the pens, the gel pens. I use some silver pen in here, and also a blue paint pen. Okay, this is a Sharpie paint pen, but all those kinds of colors, white, silver, and blue, naturally go with the blue color scheme, so those are fun little elements to add in there. And then we have things like alcohol markers and various values of blue, and I created some other shadows down in here. So that's all probably within the last, I don't know, 10 minutes of this video, if you kind of want to fast forward to anything like that. And adding some shadows in here really kind of reiterates this idea of this light source, or the scene being backlit by adding little shadows at the base of these rocks and whatnot. And those little things like that are a lot of fun to do. And that's where I like having kind of, just as with my stamp pads, you know, having a range of values within a given hue. I like having a range of values with my pens and media as well, okay? So we utilize all those things within this scene right here of a simple monochromatic scene, but even in terms of a monochromatic, simple color scheme, we can kind of get, you know, a fairly complex and easy to achieve lighting scheme in here. And it all kind of adds up to a nice rich surface, even with a kind of a minimal range of values throughout a certain piece. So anyways, I hope you enjoy the scene. If you choose to watch it being created, it was a lot of fun. I like pulling out some, in this case it's a very old stamp of mine, but in this scene it was the first time I've ever used it, and I've been kind of itching to get around to some of my own kind of personal collection of stamps that I've collected over the years, but maybe not gotten around to using them yet. So fun stuff. Thanks again for tuning in. Okay, one of the things I've been working on periodically here of late over the last, I don't know, month or so is trying to get a few scenes done for this swap that I would say I used to be in, because I haven't been submitting anything for a long time, but I wanted to get a few things out. And the things that I do about like a general scenic swap is I try to use stamps from my own private collection, you know, from other companies, just so it's not like some kind of Stampscape scene. You know, I use my own stamps, but I do want to use stamps from other companies. And I do like a lot of stamps from other companies. Some companies, I look through the entire catalog and, you know, I could see myself wanting, you know, 80% of them or something like that, 50%, you know, so we're talking thousands of designs, which I don't have, but I do have a few. Now this stamp right here is from a company called Viva Las Vegastamps. Their logo is so small, but I can't even read it, but, you know, I know what it looks like, so, you know, the shape of it, so I know it's them. But anyways, I picked this stamp up years ago, and I haven't even used it yet. You know, it's got some fresh, you know, pristine rubber on there, and it's just this little grouping of characters on horseback, and I thought that might be kind of interesting with kind of this Snowy Creek stamp. And this is going to be a snow scene. You don't have to use, you know, this creek as a snow scene. I can color it up a different way. It could be, you know, springtime, grassy, you know, image. But in this case, I'll use it with a full moon stamp. Hopefully we can get a kind of a nice dramatic looking scene out of this. And for this creek, I'm just stamping it in black. I think I'm going to have some light blue tones, maybe some gray. And I want this to be a snow scene, and I want it nice and dramatic and bold in terms of the contrast in here, you know, with the moonlight kind of hitting the snow, and the snow being a really reflective surface, it'll be very light. Okay, so now we have this creek, and I want to create somewhat of a horizon line. I think I'm going to just take a piece of paper, and I'll do this a bit of an arc, like so. Okay, so I'll be able to mask this off, like that, and I'll put the moon above it, so it's like this kind of slope here. Keep this side of it, because we'll use this to do a little bit of masking in there as well. Okay, now on this moon, you can approach it in different ways. I'm going to stamp it in maybe a couple different tones of blue. I'll use the light blue Marvy. It's a number 10 Marvy. And if you have a pen, you can go for a little bit of variation here. This is just a number 36 manganese blue Marvy pen, brush marker. Uses dye-based ink as well. Same types of inks that are in the pads. They don't have all colors of the pads. Pens in pad form. Actually, I don't have any pads anymore, but re-inker form then. But same basic typing. Now I'm wiping off the bottom of this a little bit, because I know I'm going to put these characters kind of in silhouette in front of the moon, like it's a moonrise, so I'm mopping off the bottom of that a little bit. Okay, let's see. Go about like so. A lot of surface area to this design. It's big, so I'm standing up in order to get a good firm amount of pressure on the design, and working it in all areas of it. Okay, something like that. Alright, that's basically it as far as the foundation goes. Now I'm going to keep this piece of paper, and that's going to be provide me with a bit of a mask for some other colors to come. This scene should come together pretty quickly. It's just a very basic color scheme I'm going to be working with. A series of blues. We'll go with a light blue, medium blue, and a dark blue. You can mix and match, use different brands. Let me say I have violet in that tip there. Let me switch tips here. Okay, Summer Sky Memento, Summer Sky. This Summer Sky is a really good alternative for that Adirondack Lights Aqua that I used to use a lot. Well, I still do, but the Adirondack Lights has been discontinued. I'm going to put a little bit of this tone in the moon as well. But this color blue, this value of blue is very, very light. So it's a good first color to use as a foundation. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but there's a slight blue there. I mean, it's obviously going to have to get to the, you know, the same blue that I used to blend this in. But this is a good start. This is the thing that, it's a foundation coat, and that's the thing that you kind of want to establish with your lightest colors, and you want to get a good amount of it down so that all the colors to come afterwards will blend into the scene. Okay, don't press hard. Don't press hard to make anything darker. You just go with more swipes, okay? And do it nice and gently. And don't scrub back and forth with it, always come in one direction. Okay, ergonomically this is easier for me to turn this like so. You can see what's kind of happening here. Put my mask. Okay, flip it around. I'll come with a little bit of color across my moon. So I've established kind of a horizon line, right? And that'll end up being kind of this snowy little hill. Alright, let's move up into a darker blue. Kind of hit your upper right and left corner to kind of frame off the moon. darker you make the surrounding area, the perimeter, the lighter the moon will seem by contrast. So even though the scene gets darker in some areas, it makes the lighter things seem lighter, in other words. Okay, so you can see what's kind of going on right now. Alright, now this area down here needs to be fleshed in as well, and we'll use the same tones that we used up in the sky. And let's start off again with the lightest blue. Let's go with that Memento Summer Sky. It's a good one to start off with. Let me see if my ink is dry. It's not too bad. Okay, now I'm going to try to not go too dark with some of these tones. I do want the shadows to be quite defined, and a lot of times at night, you know, that water takes on kind of a darker value. Okay, I don't want things too stark up on that slope. So we'll put some color down. I'll hit some of these shadow areas. Okay. If it's barely visible on camera, it's not very visible here in person either. So, it's not a bad thing though. You kind of want that. It's a very light, pale commitment to that color. Okay, I'm going to try some of the salvia blue on the scene as well. This is a very light blue as well, but not quite as light in value as the summer sky. Okay, let's just go for some variation. I'm kind of adding some streaks here and there. I can see where each one of these little mounds of snow are defined in a little kind of shaded area right back in here. So what I'm going to do is I'll mask off that one, then that one, maybe that one. Okay, let's see. Something like that. Okay, and I'll do the same thing for all of them. Makes me want to go somewhere where there's some snow. If you're someone living in snow and cold, you know, as far as your winter, I'm sure you're probably not feeling the same way at this point in time, at this point in the season. Okay, so you can kind of see what's going on here a little bit. We're kind of giving some volume to the these little mounds here where things look a little bit more rounded because of the use of shadow. Okay, let's hit this water a little bit. Creek, and I'll hit some of this down here with some tone as well. Okay, let's do some of those little mounds over here as well, where they might not even exist in the design. You can kind of make it up yourself wherever you want them to be. Like that. Okay. Let's put some back here as well. Kind of right along that shadow. Hopefully it'll give that kind of little area back here some mass and volume as well. Okay, so we've modeled our terrain a little bit, where it looks like, you know, there are some volumes. Hopefully that's what it looks like to you. That's the goal, at least. Adding a little bit more tone to the creek. Alright, now that transition between the snow and the sky is a little bit harsh up there, so I'm going to try to decrease the contrast a little bit. Okay, let's go to the Bahama blue. And let me see, I was going to put that mask down, but maybe I'll just freehand it. Kind of deepening the shadows a little bit. I wouldn't use your darker tones as much as you did the lighter ones, you know, but just play it by ear, figure it out. Really depends on how much ink your pad has, you know, and I don't know, just what it's looking like on your scene, but what I suggest is always kind of build it up gradually so that you can kind of see the entire process and you won't get any kind of unintentional marks that way. In other words, you won't get something so dark so fast that it was a kind of a precarious application of the color. Work lightly and dry and achieve your kind of a intended amount of coverage just with more swipes as opposed to a really wet applicator, okay? Okay, that is that blue. Coming along. Let's try the blue. It's the number 3 blue by Marvy. kind of creating a little bit more contrast with every color that we use. Contrasty. Okay, here we have it, and let's go on with black. Unless, let me see here. Yeah. Let me use my Prussian blue. Prussian blue is really quite a dark blue. And no matter how much ink I have on the surface, it really penetrates that surface. Sometimes when you go with other colors, it just, if the page is already kind of wet, it's really, the page almost starts to kind of resist the ink because it's really kind of coloring a thick ink onto a kind of a wet surface, and you really almost end up kind of wiping ink off as opposed to applying it. So something like this Prussian really makes it a little bit easier if you do indeed get this dark. I mean, you don't have to use it. I don't use it a lot, but in instances like this, it reminds me of, you know, kind of its traits, its benefits. All right, let's see here. Putting a little bit of swipe here and there into that snow, just to get a little texture in there. At this point, I mean, I could, you know, I'd really probably be better off applying the lighter tones, but, you know, I can go for a little bit of texture with this. Prussian blue, just kind of dry brushing this into the scene. If it's not smooth, that's okay. I want that texture. Okay, now let's go to the black. I haven't even really been changing my tip here. I'm using the same one. Okay. Going for that strong vignette, hitting it a lot on the upper left and right corners of the card. Something like that. Throw some down here on the base as well. Going in my little creek. Create a little bit of a separation between kind of land and sky again. Coming into focus, I guess you can say. Let's create a nice strong vignette here. All right, let's see. If I'm kind of unfamiliar with another company's images, I just want to make sure the registration is where I want it to be. As far as the positioning of the stamp on this, this is a nice tightly registered image on wood, which is what which is ideal. So you don't want a kind of image floating in amongst a big area of wood, ideally. Okay. Now I'm looking at this point right here and this point, okay, right there. I'm going to try to line it up roughly with my area on my snowy mound. But you know what, Doug, before I do that, I'm going to take this, I'm going to mop off some of that tone on there, just so the shadows aren't quite so pronounced, okay? Because that area is kind of illuminated. Well, it's very illuminated by the moon, so I'll even add a little bit of blue. Like that. Hopefully it gives me a little bit of variation. I'll even mop off a little bit again. Okay, and let's see if I can get things lined up pretty well. I'm just kind of looking kind of at eye level here. Okay, that looks pretty good. We can see the variation in those shadows. You can see where I've used that blue, okay? But they stand out nice and bold against that background, I guess. And let's see here. How about some extra foliage in here? All right, let's do that. Okay. Now, if there's snow in here, it's probably deep, so I might not want the base of this trunk here, okay, tree. So I'll have it inset. Okay, so masking off the base of the trunk. So that makes it look like the tree is kind of, buried in snow a little bit. Something like that. And let's go with another on the other side of the creek for balance. Visual balance, that is. Something of that sort. How about this to make things, it's almost too balanced for me. So I'm going to take, and I'll stamp out another one of these right over here. It's one of the nice things about scenic stamping is the ability to employ the repetition of form, and it doesn't look awkward, it just looks like another tree. Okay. And let's see here. Do I want to lead in with a fence here? Maybe. well, I don't know, they're look like cowboy types, so got to keep things corralled into a certain area maybe. Why don't I wipe off some of this down here in the imagery? Okay. Okay, actually looks pretty good, I think. It's kind of a nice lead into, you know, it kind of points in this direction and your eye goes up the creek to those figures. Alright, now I'm just looking at these trees here where they're going into that area of a lot of saturated tone. They're a little bit wet. That stamp right in the background looks pretty dry, and I can probably add some little embellishments to that, but I think I better wait to add some pigment ink onto this because I'm going to go right over some of these trees, but let's do a couple things right now. Okay. Let's take the Uniball Signo white gel pen. Okay. Just like that. I don't know what thickness this ball tip is. It's probably like a 0.7 or something like that. It's pretty large, and what I'm doing is I'm going to go into some of these areas and add a little bit of texture. I'm kind of going into the area where it's already kind of white. Okay, so you can't see it where it's white on white, but you can see it where it's kind of transitioning into the blue. And if I've kind of wiped out some of the little ridge line, like right here, see that blue on that area, what I can do is I can just kind of reestablish that with a crisp white line. See down here, some of these areas became just all the same tone, and I'm just going to kind of reestablish a little bit of a lighter top to these areas. We can see these rocks in here in the water. Now, I really kind of avoid them too much when I was sponging color, but I can come in and just kind of reestablish a little bit of a lighter top, like it's capturing, reflecting some of the moonlight. Same thing over here. I'm not going to put too much of this down in these areas because it gets a little bit darker. Well, maybe. Let me see. That doesn't look too bad, I guess. That kind of pops that out a little bit. As far as a little bit of reflecting snow. Okay, and we can establish a little bit of crepuscular light, or not crepuscular light, specular light in the water. I mean, it could be frozen over as well, and this is just kind of like ice, you know, reflecting the moonlight if you want. Yeah, we can kind of see what's going on here. Hold this up. There's little dots of white in there. You can see it on these surfaces. I've added a little bit here, here. You can add it around these tree trunks as well. Okay. How about up here onto this slope? Kind of a fun composition. Very simple. Have certain areas kind of glistening. Sometimes, where a stark white dot would stand out too much, we can go with something like a pastel blue gel or paint pen. This one is your Sharpie paint pen, and I can add some little highlights, but just darker ones for the darker areas. If you want to just get a little texture into a given area, then just add one. But you don't want it to be too stark. You can just add a highlight using colored highlight from some color within your color scheme. In other words, if I was doing a sunset or something like that, a lot of warm tones, then I can use maybe a yellow, pink, tan, that type of color for kind of like little detailed highlights. Okay. I want to go with one more image in here, just kind of a larger tree for my foreground. Although, maybe not. I don't know. I might want to. I'm going to see how it will look. So I need to get my larger Leafless limbs stamp. Okay, here's my larger Leafless limbs. I think something in the foreground, just to push the depth of field of the scene a little bit further. Might be interesting. So, now normally I would do this before I started laying down those dots, because sometimes, the dye-based ink doesn't stick to those dots, but if it doesn't, then so be it. Yeah, that looks okay. It's all about kind of layers, isn't it? Layers of imagery, layers of color, texture, kind of building, you know. In adding these branches down here too, I've kind of given myself an opportunity to put a little bit of snow on some of these branches as well. Maybe. We'll have to see how it looks, see what it looks like. Okay. So, with these branches here in the foreground, let's see if I can add some little bit of a kind of a snowy effect on some of the foreground branches. I thought it would look too kind of out of place in the background trees, because this pen is just too thick for that, so doing this in the foreground might work. Yeah, I think it looks okay. A few little dots, a little line here and there. Just depends how kind of dark the background is. I want it to stand out a little bit, but not overpowering. Okay, this is what I'm doing right here. You can see on some of these branches I've added, a little snow, especially kind of in the little what is it? Where the branch kind of, Y's out. I put a little snow in that area. Do some of it in this one. I have this upside down so I can kind of get in that area easier. So, as I always say, just turn your card in a way or in a direction where the application of a certain media or technique is going to be the most conducive for that mark. Okay? You don't always have to have things right side up, okay? So see on this one right here, if I want to get over here, I don't want to, if I'm doing it over here, I don't want to get my hand into that area, so, I just kind of turn it around, like this. See, I'm able to get at that branch easier. Okay, a little bit of snow on the branches. Maybe I can put a little bit on background tree. Maybe not. It's too big of a dot, I think. If I don't like it, I can just kind of buff that out when it dries too. It's not a problem. And I want to use pigment ink on here still, but it's still wet. This is a Pilot G2 metallic pen. I haven't even used this one yet. Let's give it a shot. This one's the same one, but it's kind of more gold, I guess. Let me see. Actually, looks like I have one. This is like a 4-pack here. I've already used a couple of them out of there. Silver. Okay. Silver is see, it's, it's reflective, of course, but it does have a value to it. when it's not reflecting light, and I like using silver in my blue scenes because it's very subtle. You can't even see it until you kind of hold it up to the light, and then it's very reflective. And it could be one of those little details in a scene. I'm kind of placing it, some touches of it roughly in areas where the background is about the same value, so it's very subtle, almost hidden, until someone might by chance hold it up to the light, and they'll get this nice little kind of bonus detail. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in this. Maybe I can see it. There's some down here in the water. Okay, there we go. See that? And here in this area of the water, it's a little bit more obscured, but then a little bit more reflective when the light's hitting it. Okay. Not easy to see, but here, let me see if I can get that. Here we go. Okay, here it's in darkness and light. I made some really small ones down there. And I put some into the blue area in the shadows right there. See that? But when you look at it like this, it's not very apparent at all. Okay, so final touches to be applied. We have a nice, crisp impressions, and utilizing the pigment ink in here should soften up some areas, and also because we have so much white of the paper, showing that white is going to be nice and effective in terms of creating a little bit of a mist and kind of some needed textural contrast with the rest of the scene. And that white will create kind of an extra type of illumination within the scene in the form of suspended kind of moisture in the air that's reflecting some of that white light from the moon back at it. Or not back at it, but just reflecting some of the light within the scene. So anyways, we'll wait for some of these trees to dry, and we'll get back to that final touch. Okay, I've given this a couple hours to dry and get all that ink set up. And so there might be a couple areas that are a little bit wet still, but I think it'll be okay. Alright, let's see, what are we doing here? Let's go with our color box, Frost White pigment ink. I'm removing a lot of the ink before I take it into the scene. Okay, my ink pad is pretty wet, so I don't want to create these blobs. Okay, now areas that I'll start working on first are the areas where I've retained the white of the paper, okay? Because this is a white color. It's the Frost White again. Okay, that's what it looks like right here. So it would stand to reason that if you have kind of moisture in the air being hit by this white light, okay, that's what this would represent here in terms of visible kind of mist in the air. So that's why we keep and retain some of that that white of the paper, okay? Sometimes you have this kind of mist in the air. It's kind of hovering around the surface. And that makes for kind of a nice touch in terms of a different textural addition to your scenes. It can also represent something kind of like a glowing light. Okay, but anyways, where you start adding this is where kind of white meets tone, okay? It doesn't have to be white meets dark, but just certain areas, you know, I kind of move it from, let's say, look at these riders in the distance there. Okay, let me try to get in close. And see this area down here where those shadows kind of meet that white snow? Okay, I'm adding this, kind of making that area kind of glow, and it transitions into that tone. In this case, it's really dark because it's black. But I'm kind of creating this transition area here, okay? Now notice I'm tapping and tapping and tapping. It's because one tap, you know, doesn't really show very much, okay? And that's what you want. You want that kind of control. So let's look at these rocks down here, okay? Let's kind of create a little bit of a mist. And as I do this, I just thought of something. Let's hold for a minute, okay? I'm looking at some of these rocks down here, okay? And let's take a little bit of this blue ink. This is a La Plume Permanent, and it is a alcohol pen, okay? There's a lot of different brands out there. But just on some of the bottom sides, okay, of these rocks, I'm going to create a little bit of a shadow. Now I'm just going with a light blue. It's going with the same color out of my color scheme, right? And I can create some additional shadow effects, okay, with a light blue. It just makes things a little bit more defined as far as a light source, and it's just one of those little details that I like to do. And the alcohol-based pens are really great to use because, you know, the alcohol doesn't smear any of the water-based you know, marks that were applied with the inks. Okay. The dye-based inks, that is. Okay. Maybe even do some shadows on those trees, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. Okay. Let's go for an even lighter blue. This was the azure blue. Okay, this one is a aquamarine, very, very light. And let's hit some of these little areas here. See how light, you know, that is. And as far as a tone, I can just kind of go along those areas, and it deepens the shadow slightly, but not very much. But again, I was going to say it's all about subtlety, but it's all about subtlety in those lighter areas, okay? Okay, that is that. Here's a darker blue. Maybe I can hit a little bit of darker blue shadows in the darker areas. Okay. So shadows can be a nice little detailed addition to to your scenes. It just basically gets into those areas that, you know, things like the stylus tool can't. And, of course, it's just another excuse to pull those markers out if you have them. A lot of people have them at this point in time. Okay, so see what that does there? I think that kind of brings that area to life a little bit more. See those light blue shadows at the base of your rocks? The creek here, I've added it, you know, along the darker edges. You see a little shadow of that rock back there, all being, you know, cast by that light. All right, let me see. I'll be a little bit gutsy. Okay, the light is coming from here. And we have our fence post right here, so you can just kind of imagine a straight line coming, and I can kind of create a little bit of a shadow being cast by that moon on that fence post. See, it's nice and subtle. Here's some trees over here, right? The angle's going to be like this now. We can kind of create these little bit longer shadows. I don't know if you can see them right here. I don't want to go too much darker. I'm not that gutsy. Okay, here's this one on this side. It's already kind of dark in there, so I don't know if you know, we won't be able to see it very much, but I don't know, I can even elongate some of these shadows. These rocks aren't very tall, so they wouldn't be casting too harsh of a shadow, but... Okay, so there we go. See that right there? Something like that. Yeah, there's a couple little lines coming across this way, but you can't really see them too much. Same thing over here, okay? Little details like that can be fun. Like, you know, little textures in here. You know, I've added those little white dots. You can kind of add these textured dots with a pen as well. Okay, just like that. I don't really like that, to tell you the truth, but what I do is I just go over it, you know, with this, so I can layer those types of effects, and it can be effective. And same with these shadows, and I don't have to just add, you know, this white texture, then add shadows in it, you know, in a kind of a linear process. I might go into it now and add some additional tone right on top of it, or not tone, but texture, in the form of these little kind of sparkly highlights, okay? Alright, so it kind of brings the terrain to life a little bit. You can kind of see it. It's a little bit more shimmery, I think, and I don't know, what would be the word? Textured. I don't know, for me, just in general, it kind of brings it to life. Just seeing what's going on. It's, I don't know, the scene is kind of still, but it's a little bit more lively with all the, you know, the textures kind of playing against one another. Okay, let's go back in with the, what I was doing before with the pigment ink. I'll try to keep this all, try to keep a conscious effort of keeping all of this within the field of view. Okay, let's see, let's go up in this area. this area around the moon. These clouds right there, kind of going in front of the moon. I can kind of soften them a touch, and even these characters back here in the moonlight, just to make them seem a little bit more varied, I can put a little bit of moonlight where they're a little bit backlit. Okay. I mean, you don't have to do something like that. Sometimes it's better if it's a nice strong silhouette, but you know, just kind of testing it out. I kind of like it. They're a little bit more, I don't know, it looks like, you know, they're more of like a rounded form. You can see a little bit on the back of that neck or in the back of that body, but you notice I don't do the whole thing because the light is supposed to be coming from behind. See some of these legs down here? Let's see if I can put that on a couple of the legs. Something like that. So it kind of turns the figures a little bit just by having them lit. So it's not like we're saying that they're not like a flat cutout or something like that. Okay, they're volumes, and we're saying by doing something like this, we're saying that the light is hitting them in a certain area. On a nice glowing moon, you can kind of soften the transition between the moon and the surrounding tone that defines the light moon. Okay, let's look out here. And let's put some of this into the water, perhaps. Maybe somewhere down here. You want to oscillate this now. It's easy to add kind of more than what would be ideal. Don't be scared about it though if you're doing this. Just, you know, once in a while just kind of hold it out at arm's distance and take a look and see how it's affecting kind of the overall appearance. When we start doing this kind of detailed work, oftentimes we're looking at objects, like tiny little objects, as opposed to kind of keeping track of the overall. And it is about the details on certain objects, but you know, inevitably it's about the overall kind of appearance. So anyway, something like that. This is a pretty simple composition, but you know, it's about kind of little details here and there that can kind of really extend the visual language that's happening in here in terms of a lighting scheme, kind of little textural details within the scene and areas. It's about layering things, okay, repetition of form. So basically you have that one scene down here, okay, that's the foundation of it all, and that would be fine if you just left it as is, okay. A moon and just a simple mask of you know, your cut piece of paper, and that mask was really used for a lot of things right here. I used it for right there in order to create the horizon, right? But then I also used it within this area down here. Within the design itself, there's these certain little areas that are kind of defined by some tone in terms of dots, but what I've done is I've just gone in here somewhere like this, and I've added some background tone, gone up here again, sponged in a little bit more background tone, and this suddenly becomes more deep in terms of visual space. I think there's a separation between these areas right here, so it looks clustered. We've done a little bit out here, down here again, I guess. So just one piece of paper can go a long ways. Then if you want to kind of separate the space even more, just put in some trees up here like that. It could be a pine tree or something like that. You can just use little bushes or reeds or something like that. And these foreground trees right here were added. I did use the larger versions right here as a repetition of form for, you know, continuity throughout the scene. But let's say if I got too dark in here with all of my blue tones, one of the things you can also do in a scene like this especially is if you have like a brilliance white pigment ink, what you can do is you can kind of stamp these foregrounds in white, and that looks interesting as well. Okay, that's if it got dark enough. If you stamp white on white, you're not going to be able to see anything, but I'm just saying if you got really dark down here with a lot of different tones, it's not kind of a lost cause, you know. You can always bend this back a little bit. You can always, you know, do something else. You can enhance the foreground with the use of light on dark. Or you can emboss, okay? Let's say we don't have like a Brilliance, which is a fast-drying pigment ink. You can stamp this out in a pigment ink and put like a detailed white embossing powder on it and have these images in the foreground somewhat raised for an actual three-dimensional touch. The blue paint pen in here for kind of little textural marks in the darker areas where white would stand out too much. And, you know, your alcohol-based markers in here, you know. I mean, you can use dye-based markers as well, you know, but start off with lighter tones, and you can kind of start building up a little bit of like shadows on all your little detailed things like trees and rocks within the image. The edge of the snowbank, you know, a little bit of a darker tone where it might be somewhat uniform as far as the tones that were applied with your sponge tools and whatnot, but little details like that are really fun and can kind of make things a little bit more volume. I can't think of it right now, but it brings out the volumes a little bit more, and it defines kind of the objects within the design, giving it more depth. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I had fun with that Viva Las Vegastamps image, and I think it worked really well with this scene. So a lot of different stamps, like great stamps from other companies out there, you know, to use with your scenic stamping elements, and they can bring an entirely different kind of look or flavor, you might say, to a scene. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for tuning into the channel.